As an apprentice, you'll be given tasks to do. These will have a definitive starting and ending point. You may be given these tasks in a brief, an email, or verbally. It's a good idea to start your evidence with the outline of the task, including the brief, the task sheet, email, or a recording. By starting with the brief, you'll be able to evidence what you were asked to do, and at the end of the task, you'll be able to evaluate how well you did. The project doesn't need to be a full project that incorporates other team members or departments, just the portion that you've been tasked with. So, if the overall project was to make afternoon tea, for example, you may only have to make the tea while someone else makes the cakes and the sandwiches, which means you only need to evidence the making of tea, but explain how it fits with the larger project of afternoon tea. Let's take that example task and look at how we might evidence it. Our brief says that we should make a nice cup of tea for the visitor. When evidencing for a project, there's an important rule to keep in mind. If you don't evidence it, it didn't happen. So, before we start making the tea, we need to research and evidence the tasks involved. What is tea? How is tea made? Who is the visitor? How do they like their tea? Milk, sugar, strength, mug, cup, etc. And when are they visiting? We may need to evidence training, how to use the kettle or the taps, etc. Not forgetting that we may also need health and safety training in there too. So don't forget to evidence that. Once the research is done and evidence, it's time to plan our task. This may need flow diagrams, mood boards, diary events, emails to colleagues, travel arrangements, and a whole lot more. For our example, it would mean arranging equipment, such as the kettle and the pot and the mugs, and booking the workspace, the kitchen. If your task calls for practice or beta tests, don't forget to include them too. Our next evidence is the task itself. Remember the golden rule, if it isn't evidenced, then it didn't happen, so make sure you don't assume that the assessor knows that you know something. In our example, I might be tempted to evidence filling the kettle with water, but this doesn't explain it fully. I should evidence removing the kettle lid, putting the kettle under the tap, turning the tap, explaining why I'm using cold water, not hot water, how full the kettle is, and so on. This might seem like a bit much because we know people know how to put water in a kettle, but we can't assume this. We're evidencing our knowledge, not testing theirs. If it isn't evidenced, it didn't happen. Sometimes projects will cross over. For example, we might be tasked with making a visitor a cup of coffee. Our research on the visitor will differ, but the use of the kettle, the health and safety implications, and the equipment will be the same or very similar. This means you can use your previous research for this new project. You should evidence your project in a single document. This can be a Word or a PDF. You should upload this to Hive under the topic Real Work Portfolio and a card named by date and project name, for example. Make sure your document can be read from within Hive but can be downloaded as a whole. This will help later in the process. Your LDC will explain more when the time comes. Don't forget to keep a local copy of your evidence to work on. A cloud-based location really helps if you change computers or you're worried about the stability of pen drives or hard drives. You have access to OneDrive through your Office 365 account.